Hello, I'd like to talk to you about the relationship between economy and ecology. In this graph, the vertical axis represents the size of the economy. Human beings have been roaming this planet for at least 200,000 years. During most of this period, the size of the human economy was negligible. The economy started to grow with the beginning of agriculture, some 10,000 years ago, but still remained relatively small. It was only with the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century that economic growth became a significant factor for individuals and societies, and the curve became exponential. The typical economist looks at this picture and says, "Yay, this is good. This is very good. Let's make sure that the curve keeps going up indefinitely." But then the scientist shows up and shakes her head. "No," she says, "this cannot go on forever. There are absolute limits in nature, and those limits are eventually going to bring economic growth to a halt." The economist responds, "You are wrong. There are no absolute limits in nature. There are only relative limits, and such limits can be raised with technology, free markets, and human ingenuity. Economic growth is necessary and cannot be allowed to stop. The curve can and must continue along its exponential trajectory." So who is right? Are there absolute limits or not? Let's think about the nature of economic growth, which is, in my view, somewhat similar to the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Economic growth has a good or positive side, as well as a negative or evil side, and these two sides cannot be separated. On the positive side, economic growth involves an increase in the production and consumption of goods and services. As a result, population and living standards rise, and civilization becomes more and more complex, both socially and technologically. The economist looks at these desirable consequences and rejoices. "Growth is good," he says. "Growth is necessary. Let's keep growing." The economist doesn't deny that there are problems in the world, but insists that every problem can be solved if only we can have enough growth. But economic growth has a negative or evil side as well. We live on a finite planet, and the ability of the planet to regenerate resources and to absorb waste is also finite. The Earth can deal with increasing production and consumption for a while, but not indefinitely. At some point, the economy becomes too big and starts to harm the integrity of the natural world, which interferes with the functioning of the Earth system and reduces the habitability of the planet. The scientist looks at these undesirable consequences of economic growth and raises alarm. "You cannot have infinite economic growth on a finite planet," she says. "Too much growth is destructive to the environment. If we let the economy grow indefinitely, it will eventually gobble up the entire planet. In doing so, it will not only harm other life forms, but will also undermine the very foundation of human civilization." In this way, the undesirable consequences of economic growth will bring about an end to its own desirable consequences. Let's look at the same graph that I showed earlier. This time, the vertical axis represents the environmental impact of the human economy. The curve is the same as before, since humanity's environmental impact is essentially a proxy for the size of the human economy. As the economy grows, its negative impact on the environment increases by roughly the same proportion. A bigger economy will therefore cause greater harm to the environment than a smaller economy. For most of human history, our impact on the planet's natural environment was negligible, though it started to rise with the beginning of agriculture. Despite soil erosion and deforestation due to agriculture in pre-modern times, the integrity of the planet's life support system was never in any danger. For all practical purposes, that was the age of sustainability. Beginning in the 18th century, the human impact on the environment started to increase exponentially as a direct result of economic growth. William Catton's term for this period is the Age of Exuberance. The Age of Exuberance actually ended half a century ago, even though we are still riding on its momentum. That era couldn't have lasted forever, since the Earth does impose an absolute limit on how much our economy can grow before it starts jeopardizing our own well-being and survival. The scientist was right all along. That limit is called biocapacity. In 1970, we reached that limit and then started to cross it. In doing so, we entered a dangerous and unstable territory known as overshoot. Overshoot means that our expenses have outstripped our income and that we are now liquidating our assets. Spending the natural capital, especially at an accelerating rate, is a bad idea, for overshoot is inevitably followed by a rapid downward trend that reduces our ability to further impact the natural environment. A phenomenon known as collapse. In the process, the biocapacity of the planet deteriorates as well. What exactly is collapse? Essentially, the age of collapse is the age of exuberance in reverse. Recall what went up due to economic growth: production and consumption, population and living standards, social and technological complexity. When the same variables decline over a relatively short period, the phenomenon is called collapse. So, where are we today? Many people think we are still in the age of exuberance. Others know we are in overshoot, but believe that it is still possible to become sustainable while expanding the perks of the age of exuberance to more and more people. Both groups are mistaken. We are actually here, in the initial stages of collapse.